Hey, Chiron, before we begin, I just want you and some people to know that it's a strange one, but one of my ancestors was responsible for inventing the leather glove. It's true.
What?
Well, they had a hand in it. Oh my God, that's the worst
God,
joke.
that's good. I like that. That's my kind of shit. That's why my family disowned me, because of jokes like that. Oh my God, I love it.
Oh my God. I am so sorry, everybody. Hey, folks, welcome to What Magic Is This? A podcast that says, fuck the eclipse, let's talk. In this show, we're going to be talking about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the supernatural, the paranormal, and the weird. Now, we have another special episode. I know it's just nothing but special episodes. When do the special episodes just become the normal episodes? Who knows at this point? But I am joined by an extremely special guest today. He is a shaman who was initiated in many traditions, such as Vodou, Quimbanda, as well as being a hoodoo root doctor. Well-traveled and well-spoken, Chiron's enthusiasm, as well as an ability to get to the heart of what he believes, while being able to share it, is extremely needed in this day and age. So, without further ado, everybody, I'd like to welcome aboard Chiron Armand. Chiron, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. And so you're in Sao Paulo right now, and how are things down there in South America?
South America. I've never been this far south, and I'm reminded of that sometimes. I spent a lot of time in California. I've been as far east from a U.S. map world perspective as Greece. London means a lot to me, but this is the furthest south I've ever been, and sometimes and Sao Paulo is south. Sao Paulo is literally halfway down the Southern American continent,
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, wow, like I really, in a lot of ways, I've been at the edge of the world here,
Right.
and geographically as well. But it's also interesting to be in a part of Latin America that is so similar to other parts of Latin America, while also so different. I recently learned that Spain and Portugal were one country until the late 1400s. So the linguistic differences that are significant, but yet I also can get by with my Spanish, are only 500 years old. That kind of stuff, certain, notions of Latinidad that are more unified throughout the Latin American, Spanish-speaking world, but become a little bit more, they have something else to them, if not entirely negated in this country. It's been weird, bro. It's been weird.
Yeah, fantastic. No doubt. Now, I've brought you on the show for a very specific reason. A lot of my Patreon content recently has been fairly ancestor heavy, and I thought I need to have somebody who's a pro at this on board. And it was almost literally a year ago where you released two videos. It was recorded on Instagram, and I believe each segment was about an hour long. You just basically free-forming about ancestors. And I listened to the entire thing, and I was blown away. It was some of the most profound and interesting takes that I've ever encountered as far as ancestors are concerned. And there was some stuff that was familiar. I've been familiar with your work specifically through a book called Deliverance, which is about hoodoo spells of protection and uncrossing and healing. But these two videos, they stood out to me. So I've been wanting to have you on a show for a very, very long period of time. So thank you so much for deciding to come on and let's talk about some ancestors today.
Let's do it. Thank you again.
Perfect. So what, in your opinion, regarding ancestral worship / veneration being the closest we come to a religion, how do you feel about this? Like, what did ancestral veneration come first?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I don't really know. When I'm thinking about what makes us us,
Right.
I often use the term vital source energies.
Okay.
I'm thinking about, because I started my professional practice strictly in a folk magic sense, with the story about power that is very popular in the folk magic and occult world. Power is scarce. Power over. Go get power. Do extreme, cool, big things that reflect the ego to get power. Protection is a reflection of certain kinds of power, etc., etc. And then I had to kind of like D school over a period of time because my life circumstances and spiritual circumstances are reflecting that this was a completely false story about power.
Right.
That's not how power works. Obviously, extreme things can be done to gain power and large rituals and go to the ends of the earth and that very cool special. We know that story. We love that story.
Yeah.
But really, what's holding us as human beings is the quality of our connection to vital source energies. And by vital source energies, I'm talking about the connection, health, and well-being of your connection to your ancestral lines,
Right.
to the stars, the cosmos, your divinity. Are your past lives all sorted out? Has everyone who you have been crossed over, or are you still an ancient Visigoth prince with a grudge? Restless dead, walking, stalking Europe as I was. My many stories. And that, what's your connection to the land? What's your connection to the good folk? All of these, you're at the center of this web.
Yeah.
And so much of what our focus is as occultists today is about augmenting more, and not this tending conversation. So to get back to what you asked, did ancestor stuff come first? I don't know, because I think that we have really strong star connection.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that star connection is ancestor stuff as well, so where shit gets like really weird.
Yeah.
But also, if you're a kid in perhaps a prehistoric context, and a warrior dies who was you saw just fucking owning this shit, owning this fucking crazy ass dinosaur-y landscape, and now you've got, I mean, yeah, you're gonna take his fucking bones and carry that shit. Like, yeah, I want some of that. Now, if
Right.
it came before the star piece or if it came after, I'm not sure. But I feel like these things all were kind of interplaying together pretty early.
Yeah, for sure. I like that you brought up the idea of grabbing bones and taking those with you. And that's always one of those things where we see with some religions that this near necromantic aspect has always kind of been there, like strangely enough. Like it's very odd to me. But and those are just some techniques that people will use for ancestral veneration. But in as many or as few words as you'd like, what does ancestral veneration entail across the world and throughout time to you?
To me, it entails ensuring connection, ensuring connection to biological and sometimes not biological lineage. Something I'm often bringing up with clients is, especially in sessions where something either about the importance of cosmology in general or a specific cosmology is coming through, that I'm often trying to get across is, we have those little maps that say you are here. That is so important.
Yeah.
You are here. There's so much that goes wrong, frankly, in our lives if we aren't here.
Yeah.
And we often are thinking that you are here from a Buddhist presence moment now. That's totally valid and totally real. But also, with cosmologies, even simply the power of ancestor veneration, not to go into all of the complexities and power of different kinds of ancestors, but simply the fact that there's something in front of you, the destiny that you're about to live out, and you can do that because of what is behind you. Okay, now you are here. That simplicity, there's so much protection in the simplicity of context.
Right.
So much protection, so much mental peace.
Yeah.
So much capacity.
Right.
Because if you are here, okay, now I can. If you're not here, well then, good luck trying to do anything.
I like that idea, which it might speak to a bit as to why ancestral veneration, even to this day, is somewhat so widespread across so many cultures. For some reason, some of us here in certain areas of the world have, I mean, people do still have pictures of deceased loved ones on the wall and whatnot, but a lot of other cultures, it's still a major part of their life. So to speak on that, why in this day and age is a consideration for the ancestors important? And also, why should it be a part of everyone's life, not just an activity of strange people like you or I?
Because if we want to be well as human beings, and if we want to find the answers to why our culture blows so fucking hard, we need to recognize that this thing that we're doing, the way that we're living, that just so completely does not serve life
No.
and does not serve us, we didn't get here by mistake.
No.
This was an agenda. You don't pervert something so thoroughly. Contact a people with the the way the culinary arts of the culture reflect the aridity of the. You can't make this shit up. This shit is gorgeous.
Yeah.
This shit is utterly majestic. To suddenly find ourselves in such extreme abstractions from land, each other, and self, as if we ourselves are not the land, as if we ourselves are not the earth, as if we ourselves are not technology. You see it everywhere, whether you're looking at the Fibonacci sequence in a flower, or you're looking at, the way that the peppers grow and then how they move into it's all here, and now we're not here. There's something wrong here.
You're speaking my language, sir. Why do you think that it has been removed as being somewhat common for so many people? And would things like cemeteries be better used for the living? Like, why this concentrating on the idea of the dead would be a little bit morbid? Might that have something to do with why we've kind of relegated this aspect of ourselves?
I myself have not yet delved fully into funerary practices and how they get expressed culturally and what that might mean from a shamanic standpoint. But my mind goes to like a few different places. One, I'm thinking about a Southeast Asian culture that I believe on a regular, pretty annual or semi-annual basis digs up their dead and dresses them up again and puts cigars in their mouths, and you can find pictures online. And it goes for us as Westerners. It goes to an extent that we would, that is particularly for us, for Western tastes, very morbid. I'm thinking of Tibetan sky burials.
The best.
Like, you're not even going to be here. Like talk about like we're just going to give you to the birds with you, But then I'm also thinking about like the long barrows, and the long barrows in throughout the British countryside. And there, I believe, are also barrows in, Northern Europe. Not so much cemeteries, but these mounds that I'm currently listening to a audiobook of The Viking Spirit, an introduction to Norse mythology and religion.
Nice.
And I was just listening to the area that where the guy's talking about a practice I know from hoodoo, which is of going and sitting on the grave of someone who you want to accumulate their wisdom or knowledge. You might sit on their grave or sleep on their grave overnight, or even bury something and then retrieve it. And I did not know that this even goes back to ancient European context. People have been sitting on long barrows to accumulate wisdom and inspiration for thousands of years. For those of us who do come from cultures where we do put the dead in the ground and maintain that as some kind of sanctified space, I guess there have been really good reasons. I might not know all of them, but at least magically, I know that they have provided us with good technology.
Right. Yeah. Chiron, this is an interesting question, but was there a moment for you where it hit you, where it's like ancestors are important? Did this ever happen for you, or is it just one of those things that was almost ingrained in you?
No, I was just trying to like fool's gold it. I was trying to have fun and be sexy, and ancestors aren't sexy. I mean, you might have some sexy ancestors, but the idea of it in our culture and our our current and contemporary magical culture, the idea of it is not sexy.
Yeah.
There was a moment, I remember I was living in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. I had an altar room where I saw clients sometimes, mostly stories where I did my magical work. And I remember there was this night where I became kind of overcome with something I did not understand, but hoodoo is a folk magic tradition that does encourage its practitioners to honor their ancestors. being, African diasporic and the struggles and lineages that come with that. So that was my right hand path. I'm doing the good thing every week. I give some water and light some incense, whether or not I hear anything. But I guess I had done that long enough that there was a particular night where I suddenly found myself in front of my ancestor shrine crying and very overwhelmed with this sense of there is healing that has to be done here.
Right.
There's healing that I, as the living, need to be engaged in to impart to the dead. And it had a very religious conviction feel to it. And I knew nothing of what I know now.
Yeah.
All I knew was that I was deeply moved from a source that I had not really interacted with before.
Right. Now, you mentioned something like having an altar. What are some of the best practice methods for ancestor interaction, in your opinion?
A shrine or some kind of a physical space is always a great idea. I think all over the world, you find this concept reflected that they're still here. They're still here, and if you're cold, they're cold. Bring them inside,
Yeah.
Whether it is an ancestor shrine that might have photos of deceased on it, along with offerings, in the spiritismo, tradition, or you and I were just talking about our love and deeply felt connection with Mexico and Mexican American traditions, and
Yeah.
the ofrenda that happens de los muertos. This is a bring them inside, bring them home. The Dagara tribe in the Dagara tribe in West Africa, the dead are under the house.
What? Oh, I like that actually quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is this, and some folks would even say, it's the kitchen, it's the pantry,
Right.
where that connection is especially thorough and strong, and it makes sense because you're talking about home, you're talking about family, you're talking about hearth, the fire we gather around, the place where sustenance comes from. So keeping these things in mind might help someone find a space physically or an idea at least that it serves them to begin connection with ancestors with. Absolutely ancient as fuck, the carrying of mementos, the carrying of objects
Right.
from dead, from beloved dead, from especially skilled, talented, or knowledgeable dead in particular arenas. These are great magical and occult tools. I love that. Gotta say dreams. Dreams are a huge, asking for help in your dreams, paying attention to dream messages. But I'd be remiss if I did not mention also simply, when you're riding the bus. All of these connections are there, and your blood lineage ancestors are your closest allies. If that connection is strong and cultivated, which you can do, if it has not been done for you. So making sure that the extremes are lovely and wonderful, but also do not let them replace the simplicity of, hi, hello, I love you.
Right.
Here's a glass of water. Here's a spill of water. Here's a spill of my morning coffee on the ground.
Right.
These things matter.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a Boveda style ancestral altar, and every morning you just say hello. Hello, good morning. At night, just some prayers, an offering. My altar is, our listeners can't see it. I have just over my shoulders, my altar. It's in the living room. When people ask, what do you do when friends come over or people you don't know come over? It stays there. Truthfully, people are somewhat just like, yeah, okay, whatever, and they move on. But offerings, altars, prayers, just paying mind, saying hello, it's all very important stuff. As somebody who's a practitioner in hoodoo, because this is one of those things where a lot of people will just be like, well, I don't understand what difference this makes. But what is Florida water?
Oh, Florida water. Florida water is a commercial cologne from the 19th century that was, as far as I understand, something of a household staple. It was, easy to find in grocery stores. You splashed it on yourself. It's alcohol based. So when you splash it on yourself, it evaporates, but the scent it leaves is floral and uplifting and very citrusy.
Right.
And like many other household items, it became a staple in in the hoodoo folk magic tradition. for not only cleansing due to its citrusy nature and alcohol-based content.
Right.
It's something that I learned from Santeros and hoodoo practitioners early in my own practice. You do some magical work, or you got to cleanse yourself. You just splash some Florida water on your hands, immediately just wipe your aura down,
Yeah.
and that's great. My first boyfriend back when I was a teenager, he was Cuban.
Okay.
And he introduced me to Florida water, and he always had it. He always put a drop or two in a glass of water, and that's where I began to understand this. In the African diasporic traditions, especially hoodoo, there's this sense that the dead, the beloved dead, like sweet scents.
Mm-hmm.
So even today, I have not found Florida water here in Brazil.
Oh, really?
I have not found it here in Brazil. And even in Guatemala, when I did find Florida water, I opened it up. It was not Florida water. It was like water. I was really mad. But even today, a drop of rose water in my ancestor altar is mainstay, absolute mainstay.
Do you make your own Florida water down there?
I had a dream about doing so about 2 months ago, but I have not yet.
All right.
So it's on my agenda.
I hear you. This is an interesting question. It's one of those ones that comes up for a lot of people. But how does one who has lost much of their culture and traditions through immigration and colonialism, sometimes even aspects of the way that their ancestors would practice, has been banned, like outright banned by whoever they're being occupied by, I'll just put it that way. But how do people connect with ancestors if this is the case?
Open your heart, and I would say start with the words ancestral helping spirits who lived well and died well. That creates a very good context for, you don't want unresolved dead. Many of because we live in a culture where we don't tend our dead, many of our ancestors are ghosts.
Yeah.
We are not doing the work. We're not doing the work of living well.
No.
And therefore we're not doing the work of dying well. Funerary rites really are another technology. They are meant to be a technology for the living and the dead. The technology is such that the funerary rite ensures that the dead cross over and go to where they belong, and the funerary rite ensures that the family of the person also has a significant amount of acknowledgement of the situation and some time collectively to grieve. And we don't have any of this shit.
No.
We're just like, we're not serving life, we're not serving the dead, we're not serving. Yeah, I'm gonna bring it back to what I said earlier. I don't give a fuck what people think, but guys, what the fuck is going on? This wasn't a mistake. This didn't just happen. I sometimes have a little envy for folks who come from sound, clear, specific cultural backgrounds. That is a beauty of specificity and immediate, at your fingertips self-knowledge that I will never have in this lifetime.
Yeah.
However, I have had the extremely cool pleasure of waking up from a dream about Scottish trees with long men's faces and knowing that at some point I'm going to go there and know exactly where that grove of trees is that is so specifically ancestrally connected to me.
Right.
And, a week later, having something, I recently was being made aware of my own, Spanish-Portugal heritage, which would make sense given my connection to Latin America and to Brazil and to, certain arts that have had teachers of mine like, why are you really good at this? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
And I now understand. So those of us who are in, diasporic and immigrant positions, for those of us who are navigating experiences of cultural immigration, diaspora, what we have is an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real adventure for us. Dive right in, eat it all up.
Yeah. Do you think that's not to go to books, say, of other occultists, but perhaps books of history or anthropology of past cultures might help in some regard in this way? Or maybe just talking with teachers or those that are older and therefore wiser? Do you think this helps in some way as well?
Absolutely. But I would also say, see where you're led. One thing that I've learned about the healing process is, again, you are technology. In this technology, this whole thing is technology. And I'm not saying that to dehumanize our experience, but to say that there is a flow. Things are programmed toward goodness.
Oh,
So with things being programmed toward goodness, there was no way that my Celtic ancestors could have really gotten through to me what my connection to them meant 7 years ago.
right.
I had to walk my path, and they came along at just the right time. There was a certain trust in the inherent goodness of life, and a certain trust in my helping spirits that I was leaning into, that they would pass me off to the next spiritual teachers in the spirit realm, in the human realm, that were right for me. So absolutely, dive into curiosity but also lean into to call is, know that calling is happening at the right time.
Right. This next question kind of speaks to that as well. And I get this quite often, especially recently as I've been pushing people to really get in touch with ancestors in these incredibly wild times. It's like, it's very helpful for me, and I hope it's helpful for others. But people will say, I've done everything. I've built an altar, I do offerings, I do prayers, absolutely everything, but I'm not getting anything coming through. It doesn't seem like they're listening. How do you recognize if or when you've begun an interaction, and in what way do these interactions take place, Chiron?
Sure. So, a lot of people would say that they were made especially aware of ancestral connection specifically when they had a dream. The dream of either a loved one that they knew during life, or the dream of, there was someone that they might not have even known, but there was a certain familiarity with that person where they might have something. I just knew this was an ancestor. I myself, I think I shared the story about my experience of like, whoa, big ancestor with like ancestor plural energy coming through with a calling. But one of my, I think actually I had an earlier experience a few years earlier. I was in college. I'm pretty sure I was not tending an ancestor shrine at that time. I'm pretty sure I was just working magically. But I do remember I had a dream, and the dream was of a woman, and she felt very big and very bold. And when I woke up, I simply knew two things. One, I knew she was an ancestor. And two, I knew that now she was with me. I clarified that a couple of years later when I got better with my mediumship and trance skills. And I asked her, like, are you one of my ancestors? And she said, no, I'm not. But I have been walking with your ancestors for so long, I smell like them.
That's great. Do they ever make themselves known audibly or visibly in some way for you?
For me, audibly, sure. Especially as I engage them in my work, I have a South African medicine woman ancestor whom I work with very intensely. And so I work with her in trance a lot with my clients every day with my clients actually, and she's really really into it. But I wouldn't say that I'm the most physical manifestation of spirits kind of person.
Right.
I've kind of got like two eyes. I've got my physical eyes, and then I've got my behind the eyes thing going on, and that works pretty well. And I would say that for me, there are a couple of specific ancestors, especially those that I knew while they were alive, that stay close. But for me, usually in my own practice as of today, I'm usually cultivating my relationship to the collective, working on healing, bringing some healing to this particular lineage that I know is causing this havoc or lack in my life, this part of my web not being tended well, that I now have the ability to do so, and frankly feel the responsibility to do so, and probably have the responsibility to do so.
Right.
And then there's some times where, it might not be about a particular culture or a particular lineage, but a particular type. A couple of days ago, I had a dream, and the dream was about pirate ancestors.
Ew.
And I woke up and I was just like, oh, that's cool. Like, yeah, people gotta, really like, you got all different kinds of ancestors, and if they're well, and lean into them. And then it was, it took me about a day before I was like, okay, Chiron, that's great. Like, get off your soapbox and realize that was you being told to call in your pirate ancestors, give them some cachaça right now.
Hmm.
Cachaça being, the rum that is most available and popular here in Brazil.
Right.
Yeah, it's not just cultures, it's lineages, it's types,
Right.
it's specific ones with specific medicines, it's ones that you were.
To speak on that idea of lineages, Chiron, a question that some people have, specifically when they want to try and get involved with ancestral veneration, for those that might be adopted or perhaps even their parents are adopted, how does one, I don't want to use the word work around this, but to try and find your way if your lineage you might feel from the outset is somewhat severed or broken?
Sure. So for a person who's adopted, from my understanding, this person, from a spiritual perspective, is now considered to have two sets of ancestors.
Okay.
Because adoption is not only a legal process, but it is a spiritual process.
I love it.
So now you have two sets of ancestors, and just like with any of us, the certain quantity of reflection of ancestral lines is going to differ based on who you are. I think that we make incarnational decisions.
Right.
And this is not to say that every person who has been adopted said before they were born, I'm going to be adopted by that family.
Right.
But I do believe that that can also play a role here.
Hmm.
I believe that ancestors also pray us into being, and that ancestors of a line can pray into being someone from another line to join the family group. There are obviously pitfalls and difficulties and pain that can be encountered there, but also extraordinary gifts. Someone who is from a different biological line in the family can reflect certain family traits,
Right.
while not reflecting others, and therefore brings new perspective that might be greatly, greatly needed for that ancestral line.
Hmm.
And both sets of ancestors, if called upon and tended well, can help you.
Right. Would it be one of those things where it's almost, I don't want this to sound glib in any way, but perhaps an idea that you were brought to help repair things?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all are.
Yeah.
I think we all are, and someone in that position is a particularly unique position. Not unique as in rare, but it takes things to a certain extreme. It could be to repair things. It could be to receive things.
Yeah. Like we have to seek some outside help here. Kind
For
of.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
I love it.
When you say that, I immediately think about, well, that's what happens when these ancestral lines, you like everything's going on, and then you've got the oddball. You look at that family member, and you're like, you are from outer space.
Right.
And we have no one here is really reflecting our cosmic ancestry the way that you are. That's really so similar to, we need some outside help.
Yeah. What is ancestral remediation and why is it important?
So ancestral remediation can look like many, many different things. It is the issue. It's the concept that things happen in the family line that affect the descendants.
Mm-hmm.
Either an event, something that a specific ancestor did that has affected that just in and of itself, the actions are reverberating down the line of the descendants, or it could be something that an ancestor did that now the spirit, because as I mentioned before, that ancestor that I thought was an ancestor in my dream was not an ancestor. It was a spirit that was walking with my ancestral line. So there's, again, fucking web, man. Nothing is in and of itself. Like, okay, so it's me. Oh no, now it's my ancestors. Oh, now it's the spirits that walk with my ancestors. Yeah, actually, and it's fucking delicious, and beautiful, and it's a beautiful adventure. So ancestors can do things, can absolutely drive an ancestral line out of favor with the gods, with the land, with ancestral spirits connected to protection or luck.
Right.
These things can happen as well. As per our context, there's not a lot of people tending this or knowing how to tend this or look for it. There's just people walking around saying life sucks.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. And not to sell, a golden bridge, but that is a factor. Are things well, and are there weak links? And a ton of us have really, really, really weak links when it comes to things like ancestral luck and protection. There's, if we're going to get even more cosmologically sound, which I'm always a fan of, like, let's go to a source and get some specifics.
Right.
Looking at the Norse context, we have the concept of a Hamingja, Hamingja. And this is literally it's considered one of the parts of the soul, while simultaneously being considered sort of the spirit of the family's ancestral luck.
Okay.
So the luck that is walking with one family. And so therefore it is in some way reflecting the accumulation of ancestors' deeds that would support the descendants in the line moving forward. So if you had, if whether due to shitty character or shitty circumstance, a string of difficult generations, your Hamingja might not be that great.
Right.
And the support that you could be having from this wing of cosmic connection, you can do some things to bolster that. You can do some things to support that.
Right.
That's one, somewhat, it's not really out there, but that's one concept of ancestor remediation. There are ancestors that need to be fed. There are ancestors that need to be crossed over. Ancestor remediation can look like many different things, and it all goes back to the quality of your connection to vital source energies.
Right. A lot of people are the weirdos in the family, people like you and I, people that enjoy the more esoteric, the more magical side of life. And they have a interest or just it's something feels like they have to be part of a repair in some way for ancestors. And I think a lot of people, they don't look at this in the best way possible because an interest itself means in some way a calling. I don't know how you feel about something like that, but for me, it's always one of those things that it's not like I have more work I have to do, but it's more of like, this is a charge that has been brought to me and I need to not take advantage of it, but I need to be able to take it upon myself to help in as many ways as I can. So when the people say like nobody else in my family is like this, they're all very scientific, they're all very material. Why am I interested in this kind of stuff? I say it's a gift. You've got a gift, and you've got to go for it. I don't know if that registers at all on your side, Chiron.
It does, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if that's how it gets expressed at first.
Right.
I feel like that kind of calling is a calling that comes with a certain. I feel like you have to have at least one or two toes in energetic spiritual adulthood
Yeah.
to have that calling.
Right.
Because I think the first way that that's expressed is not, as a child, a call to repair. The first way that is expressed is simply expression.
Yeah.
That the family context is driven to kill.
Yeah.
And that's really the first clue for those people are, did your family try to kill you? And I don't necessarily mean that like physical violence necessarily, but were you expressing things as a child vibrantly, naturally, that your family context was simply just shut it down.
Right.
Shut it down with their collusion, because it was their collusion with the stuck ancestral patterns and with the generational curses and whatever, and with the lost Hamingja Kahunga, and it was their collusion with all of that, and the fact that your incarnation bypassed that enough, that then leads to the brokenness and the extreme pain and loss and that we then experience, that then leads us on our way. It's on our upswing.
Right.
It's on our upswing of reclaiming, wait, I kind of am amazing. Why can't they see that?
Right.
And that's when we get the call.
Yeah. Now, this is something that I think that a lot of people of our proclivities have to deal with. And you mentioned something a bit earlier about your family trying to kill you, or at least try to quell this side of you. And this might speak to this a little bit, but a lot of people's families have been really shit to them. Or they look back at their family and their ancestry and say, well, I'm pretty sure that nobody in my family was good. I want to distance myself as much as possible from these people. People's families have hurt them in some way, and many don't feel comfortable at all with interacting with ancestors on both sides of their families because they've been cruel or they've been hurtful. But what is your take on the idea of forgiveness in this respect?
It's really interesting that you bring that up. I recently did an event with the incredible Krishana Deshelle, who is at I Am a Witch on Instagram. We did an event called the Spirit Salon, and it was a virtual seance. We had about 8 participants. It was beautiful and took place right around the October 31st. And what was a particular attendee that was facing this question. I myself do not have any very recent ancestors that caused me extreme undue trauma,
Right.
or were particularly outcast or exiled in ways that would make me especially familiar with this kind of family or ancestral condition. But this attendee did. Mm-hmm. And the perspective, I can't say that this was something that I worked through alone, or even just with Krishana. It was really this beautiful experience of working with Krishana and this attendee's grandmother ancestor who was also present. Mm-hmm. That we together, the 4 of us were together tracking and piecing together this information as to why this male ancestor was standing behind the grandmother and saying he was willing to help, and said, but he wasn't going to pressure anyone. He wasn't going to do anything. Right. And out of that came the story of family shame, right, and of being shamed, and of the family lost cause due to years of drug addiction and quote unquote failed rehabilitation efforts. Mm-hmm. And there was a story that was he just couldn't get it together, bad person. Right. And it was so specific. The conversation about forgiveness wasn't just, okay, fine, you can come back, I'm a good person now.
Right.
Basically, the story about forgiveness was so specific to the attendee, and the fact that she was the only one in the family at this time who had the capacity to even see a broader picture of scapegoating, right, that had been happening with this ancestor, of ways in which this ancestor had been taking on family difficulties energetically that no one else could, and the ways in which forgiving this ancestor served her own healing process in regards to her connection to her creative gifts, right, and what this ancestor could bring. There was so much more than simply a Christian turn the other cheek here.
Got it. I think a lot of people think that mainly forgiveness means absolution. And I don't know if that is possible. Perhaps forgiveness in some way is a way of being able to forgive so that they no longer harm you. I don't know if that tracks with you at all.
I would say that my experience of forgiveness, bonds are bonds. Mm-hmm. And, we can be bonded through love. We can be bonded through hate. We can be bonded through hurt. Forgiveness, when it comes to an ancestor or even a living relative, is usually for me about, I am willing to walk forward from this place. Yeah. And not being stuck, not saying that, like, when I say stuck, the word stuck gets such a bad reputation. Right. It's just not being able to be present in the more that you exist in the present moment, the more of you that is in the present moment, the faster you heal. Right. The faster you manifest. And we are human beings who, in all of this abstraction, in all of the trauma of contemporary life, we are strewn energetically across time and space. Right. There's a piece of me still in kindergarten in Queens, New York, when the teacher looked at me and said I was a bad boy. He's still standing there with his jaw dropped in the classroom, soul loss. There's a piece of me in the cosmos from when I was abducted by aliens when I was 4. We're strewn across. We're not present or not here. All of me is not in my body. Yeah. The lack of forgiveness is yet another way that we remain abstracted from ourselves.
Yeah, I hear that. It's wonderful. People that know this program know how much I love the idea of time, and so that really resonates with me. Now, here's the thing. I know a lot of people, they get caught up on this, but how does one get with the idea that perhaps one's ancestors would not approve of their lifestyle or their sexuality or any of those concerns? What would you have to say to this, Chiron?
That's great. So, in my experience, the dead can change a lot when they cross over. Yeah. The dead do gain new perspective. And I've never encountered a truly healthy ancestor, someone who, after they died, either naturally and with spirit help, or with the help of someone like myself or another medium or another kind of practitioner, moved them on to get them to the other side. I have never found one of those ancestors who then returns. So that's the thing. It's about
Right.
you die, you cross over, and then you come back. And that coming back is a whole, we're talking caterpillar to butterfly.
Right.
It should feel different. It should look different. It's like grandma grief, she just died. That's one thing. Grandma, big, bold, you smell the cookies, you feel the warmth. In your dream, you wake up, you're crying. It's grandma,
Right.
but it's grandma who got right with God.
Mm-hmm.
It's grandma who got right with God and resolved her life. And sure, she, some part of her, and that's why, many traditional cultures have a multi-soul idea, the idea that part of you is going to remain with the ancestral line by actually reincarnating down the ancestral line. Part of you, remains as a helping spirit, like Moana. By the way, if you want to fucking learn about like ancestors, like worship, just fucking watch Moana.
Right. Yeah.
All you have to do is fucking watch Moana and just do what she did. Just sing. Just sing and do what you have to do.
Right.
Actually, that's all it comes down to. But like, I have never encountered a blessed, healthy ancestor who has crossed over and come back to have any kind of fucking bias.
Yeah.
And this is not to say that there aren't personality traits, but when we're talking about inequality, when we're talking about, I hold a perspective that is absolutely at odds with life because some part of me colludes with the agenda to de-diversify gender and sex and culture, and none of those abstractions serve life. If I did encounter an ancestor like that, I would cross them right back over, which sometimes does have to happen.
Yeah.
But that's not someone who has made right with God / the cosmos.
Yeah, I think people have this idea in their heads that the personality and the ideas that you have while you are alive does not change after death. And that to me is like, death not only changes you here in this world, grieving, mourning, etc., but also changes those who have died. And guess what? That's a change we all have to go through. But you can't imagine the amount of understanding and compassion that occurs when somebody crosses over, as you say. So
the perspective is tremendous, unquantifiable, probably.
Yeah.
And there's levels too. There's levels. Whether you can cross over and come back and maybe be at. I believe it's Daniel 4, author of Ancestral Medicine, who gives us. Very good book, and he gives us this. He gives us Westerners. I love gauge stuff, like in the abstraction, the seeming abstraction of spiritual stuff. I like to know, like, all right, I'm doing a crazy process. Like, I will go into Journey and I will ask, show me the percentage I'm at of having completed this process. He gives us this, 1 to 10. Like, how healthy is this ancestor? How healthy is this ancestral line? And an ancestor can cross over that was not well and come back as a 7.
Yeah.
But be even healthier if maybe they crossed back over, if they experienced some elevation, if they worked with the living more and cultivated more of their own new process. And I want to go back, that South African medicine woman ancestor that is so important to me. And God, like, just talk about like gems. Like, there's gems that are waiting for you.
Yeah.
I was I was in my hoodoo folk magic practice, and still am. And I had just started learning how in the hoodoo culture, bone reading had just taken off. So we were all learning Sangoma style bone reading.
Awesome.
Sans initiations,
Right.
collecting objects and in a folk magic and omen and augury way. And I do have a cool goat skin. I will say that.
Nice.
But I suddenly I would throw my bones in divination, like, yo, this hits different.
Yeah.
It's different, and I don't know why. And I remember the night that I kind of like leaned in, and I was like, "Oh, there's a woman who is here, and she's got a cigar, and okay, this is something." And she by blood, she was like, "What? A few thousand years later, a motherfucker in my line is in New York with some bones. And that was our introduction. I was like, oh my God, like me doing this just caused like such a ripple effect that this ancient ancestor of mine just like stepped right the fuck forward.
Right.
And I share all this to say that this ancestor of mine looked very different back then.
Right.
When I first encountered her, she had a lot of baggage, and I mean that like the way I saw her in the spiritual world, she actually looked like she always was covered in pots and pans, like there were all these like hooks on her,
Huh.
and she had a lot she was carrying. And it wasn't until I started learning more about ancestor remediation that I finally was like, I looked at her and I was like, I knew that she was an ancestral helping spirit. I knew that she had crossed over and come back, but I also suddenly was aware, simply based on the quality of her energy. I looked at her, I was like, "You're not well. You're not as well as you could be. Let's clean up." And I, as I say, I sent her back to the car wash. I crossed her over, and the version of her that came back looked so different and so much healthier and more vibrant.
Mhm.
I know that I could not be doing the work that I'm doing with her. I know that she would not have the capacity to do what she's doing with me now had she remained in that position before.
Right.
Um, she still loves cigars a lot.
Well, she's only human, right? Well, in some
Exactly.
respect.
And tobacco, like tobacco spirits, like
Yeah.
that's a whole podcast in and of
You,
itself.
no doubt, man. You said something that in one of your Instagram videos, I believe it was maybe the first, like maybe even within the very first 5 minutes of the first one, that really impacted my life. And I'm going to get a little bit anecdotal here, but you said that many of us are reincarnations of our ancestors. And it's not like it was the first time I came across this idea because I've had inclinations. My family is incredibly stunned that I have basically all of the interests, mannerisms, sense of humor. I walk the same, I talk the same of an ancestor of mine, basically my mother's father, who passed away about 4 years before I was born. That side of the family loves to walk behind me on purpose because they like to see their father walking again. And even for things like certain snacks that are my favorite, they're the same as this ancestor. A lot of people would say, well, that's just genetics, or that's just memes, memory genes, or something like that. But I've always felt a very close connection with this person who I have never, ever met. So if you could elaborate a little bit more on this idea that people can be, and some of us, and many of us, if not all of us, are reincarnations of our ancestors.
But yeah, dude, actually thank you so much for what you just said about your experience of being this ancestor. That's so beautiful
Mm-hmm.
and so specific, and I've never heard anything like that.
It's really interesting. My grandmother loves walking behind me. She sees her husband walking. I walk exactly like him. I talk like him. I'm basically him in so many ways. It scares my family. It really does. So
Wow, wow. Yeah. So I guess I first started, encountering the concept of persons being their own ancestors in my work of ancestor remediation, where a client would come to me, and now this happens fairly often, and they're just aware of something that's going on in their life that they would like to resolve, and they don't know the root of it. The root of it ends up being an ancestral issue,
right,
and many times, not all the time, but many times, it's an ancestral issue that they began, that they caused
right,
in a past life in their own ancestral line.
right.
And I have a couple of these because shaman people have shaman problems.
They do.
And yeah, I actually it was actually just during this call that I suddenly realized that a particularly thorny past life of mine, and I say particularly thorny, that I have always considered to be solely a past life issue. It is simply during your and my conversation right now, I suddenly realized, shit, that is also an ancestral issue, and I did not realize that. So
Right.
thank you for the context of the show and the illumination there for me as well. That brings some oddities, and it does bring some oddities. I mean, if you're the one who causes the issue, the reverberation is big,
Yeah. Yeah.
because past life stuff has its own baggage,
Right.
its own, at least in my own practice, its own protocol for thoroughly and completely resolving it,
Right.
and ancestral stuff too. And then that brings in then that begs the question, okay, interesting for you to now be presented with the opportunity to resolve something that you started.
Yeah.
That's not coincidental.
No.
Now I'm talking about this, from a purely sad perspective. What I'm actually fucking delighted, and I have another particularly poignant sad perspective, but taking a break from sadness to celebrate the beauty that you are. That is so cool, dude. Like really beautiful,
Yeah.
and to express how that even is expressed by your family, that your grandmother loves walking behind you. I mean, my heart is deeply moved. I never would have thought about the kinds of comfort
Yeah.
and familiarity and family bonding. Like, that speaks to something so visceral and tangible about not only ancestral connection, but how ancestral connection upholds family connection.
Yeah.
It's so gorgeous. I, on the other hand, happen to be the reincarnation of my paternal grandfather,
Okay.
who died of alcoholism and left the family. And that was something that I was made aware of some years ago. And it was really shocking to me because I wasn't on my radar at all.
Right.
We have a plethora of beautiful living traditions that, when engaged well, should speak to each other.
Right.
So that's why, a few minutes ago we were talking about the Hamingja in the York tradition. We are now going to make a short venture into the world of Santeria, where I was in California a few years ago, and I had the opportunity to, I'm not in Santeria, but I had the opportunity to sit with a renowned Santero, a renowned priest in the tradition of Cuban Santeria, who was in California from Florida. The divination system of Dilogun is just utterly sexy.
Yeah.
And you have the opportunity to sit with a knowledgeable and skilled Dilogun reader. Please do so.
Take
Again,
that. Oh, yeah.
yeah. Have you had a Dilogun reading?
I have not. No.
Oh my God, dude! Like, I will happily make a recommendation for you. It is just, I mean, I'll throw cards to the blue in the face. Love me some bibliomancy, but like, how about we sit with a system that is thousands of years old, with someone who is throwing shells that have been fed with blood in the way that they have been so for thousands of years. Let's talk about good technologies and the value of them, and not only that, but to move from divination to magic, we're talking about these 16 shells. The way they fall is going to speak to one or two of 256 Odu, 256 stories in the Yoruba tradition that's going to tell you what story you're living right now and how to move forward. The end.
Right.
Sexy as fuck. And I'm sorry, I had to just like take that moment out because I'm a nerd. I'm a fucking nerd, man.
I hear you.
So I'm sitting with this this priest, and I'm at a weird crossroads of my life, as I tend to be every day, and he throws these shells, and he's looking at them real weird. He looks at me and he says, "We don't have in Santeria the concept of reincarnation, but there is a male ancestor who is very, very close to you, like really close to you, and he is so close to you that." Again, we don't have the concept of reincarnation tradition, but I have to fall just shy of that.
Yeah.
And you have some stuff to resolve there. As you said, did a male ancestor die? It had never crossed my mind. Did a male ancestor die within a few years of you being born? And I sat there and I said, yeah, I think my dad's died. Yup.
Yeah.
Whose name is my middle name.
Right.
And that brought up a lot to resolve. Only a little bit did I resolve within that tradition. Most of it I took back to my own, my own shamanic laboratory.
There you go.
modest boy. Sorry, I fucking love Dexter. But most of it I took back and had to sort of like piece through. But I suddenly, in a sad on the sad perspective, oh wow, like I left home the exact age that he died.
Mm-hmm.
So he died when my father was 16 years old,
Okay.
and 16 years old is the year that I left the family.
Right.
And like these little like age things, I suddenly could see much clearer the relationship I had with my father.
Right.
I could suddenly see much clearer certain karma's not my favorite word,
Right.
so I'm going to like not I'm going to leave it really nebulous, but like certain karma that I had in relationships, given the what had happened with my grandmother, whom I love, having been her husband, certain like really weird entanglements, and it's something I'm still working on. It has not yet stepped into a bright, beautiful, clear, true thing, but it's a little bit hazy because he chose to be reincarnated as someone who has a lot of other stuff going on too.
Right.
Like
Right.
not the only thing on my table. But yeah, sorry if that's too long-winded.
No, no, it's a perfect. No, it's one of those things where anybody can have their ideas as to reincarnation, et cetera, et cetera. There's plethora of books that you can go through that kind of point to like that's a bit too specific. And I think in a strange way, it's not just one of those things where you yourself know, but if you are close to your family, if your family's dropping hints that you act exactly like somebody that within their family that they know, it's probably something to look into. I'd say, like, at least give it a bit of a
For
check.
sure.
You can keep your ideas about karma, reincarnation, all of these things, but there's just sometimes if the signal is so loud, you can't ignore it, right? And it's one of those things that I don't think a lot of people really think about, the idea that they might be, in fact, a reincarnation of a member of their own family. We all love this idea of past lives. We all love the idea that perhaps they were a 17th century cobbler in Cornwall in England. That's all well and good. Probably you have been. Most likely you have been. But there's also things a little bit closer in this timeline that needs investigating.
Which you actually just revealed something for me right now. No one in my family could do that.
Right.
No one in my family could do that because this is an ancestor that no one speaks of. No one talks about him.
How do you work around that?
Well, I have had to, I think one of my first actions was just to like look in the spirit world and be like, I wasn't even like, thinking about you guy. You weren't even on my radar, but it looks like I was you. Let's cross you over.
Right.
And I crossed him over, and he came back.
Yeah.
And he was definitely not a 10 on the Daniel 4 scale of healthy ancestors. He definitely was not.
No.
And not only was he not, but that was like, cute kid, like that's not enough. I really had to go into trance and work to resolve certain scenes from his lifetime where he brought trauma to the family. And I became aware of certain like drives I had that were sometimes overwhelming to leave home. I mean, I did leave home as a teenager, but like to leave home, like if I'm at home, like I gotta go,
Right.
and I can't be there. And I was like, oh wow, like that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
Like that's what he was leaving home for long periods of time to go with his buddies and come back kind of deadbeat and then like leave again. I'll never forget. I was probably about 12 or 13 years old. My grandmother, one of the few times I heard my grandfather spoken of, I remember, and one of the few times I also heard usually I experience as very calm and cool and collected and intellectual grandmother.
Right.
One of the times I heard her really express emotion in a very deep way. I remember we were sitting down and she said to me, and she looked at me and she said, Chiron, I used to have dreams of driving by alcohol stores, liquor stores, and throwing Molotov cocktails at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such was her pain
Mm-hmm.
of the way in which substance abuse had destroyed her marriage, and perhaps even a portion of her life as far as she was concerned. yeah, the resolving him has required my coming into understanding a number, using technologies that I knew, and then also cultivating technologies that I did not know to hit every angle. One other thing is spirits have spirits.
Yeah.
Uh, and there were definitely some spirits hanging out with him that needed to be gotten rid of too. It was and has been a process.
Right. This is a word that you used a little bit earlier, a couple of times, but mediumship and further means of communication. Are these helpful if you're maybe not starting out, but a little bit further on down the line? Would you recommend something, say, like, I mean, there's everybody's idea of, say, a seance, like pure spiritualism seance. There's other modes of el spiritismo that mediumship can come in, but what's your experience with such things, and how does it work for you?
Every practitioner has their gifts and their specialties, and I'm always in awe of how information comes through, and usually that also relates to what is considered a value from the culture that is coming through. So, for instance, I can speak to my experience of the difference between like a misa and like a mediumship, like kind of televised experience. Mediumship kind of televised experience usually is, in my experience, really reflects American culture's obsession with the facts.
Right.
Like I want we literally have the term physical mediumship. He's wearing a red shirt.
Right.
Oh, okay. I just needed to know he existed, that this kind of thing was real,
Right.
and that I was loved.
Yeah.
Like that's what and so that's very physical mediumship, American culture, not spiritualism, but American culture. Whereas in my experience of like a New York Cuban American misa espiritual, not only is space being held for biological ancestors, but also one spiritual court from an espiritismo perspective, which might include a wide array of other kinds of spirits that are walking with you. And now the emphasis isn't on he's wearing a red shirt, he drove a Porsche, but now there's this real emphasis on your energetic health, warnings, what's ahead of you. You need to have this ritual done. Stay away from this kind of person. It's a real showing of that idea that the dead are really heavily invested in the lives and well-being of the living.
Right.
This is not to say that good information, good advice might not come from the former category, but even the former category not being related to a culture that directly has the technologies is going to then grab the Florida water off the Misa Espiritual and off the Misa and the Misa table, and the medium is going to get possessed by your grandma and sip some of the Florida water and speak. Like, again, the web is there for the necessary information and the technologies to all happen at once.
Yeah, it's strange to me because the impetus is there for people once they've made some kind of a connection or an interaction has begun, that they immediately want to know more. And a lot of times they'll go to something like an Ouija board, or they'll go there's so many directions you can go to further whatever contact you have besides things like dreams. In some ways, it's odd because if you read any historical accounts, a lot of the times the mediums, they don't exactly get who they want to talk to, which makes the connection that you have to have with your ancestors to be somewhat clear and concise. Is there a way that you think that people can recognize that they're getting a clear, I hate the word signal, but I think people know what I mean when I say signal?
I was actually just talking to the incredible Sarenth Odinson, who can be found on Twitter at Sarenth, I believe, who is an incredible Odinsman. We were just talking yesterday, not from an ancestor perspective, but more from a polytheist perspective. And he was reminding me of the value of asking that messages and omens arrive in threes.
Right.
Or sevens or nines, which inspired me to sort of remember, our helping spirits are not trying to trick us or hide, and you can't see me. I mean, sure, some of them are sometimes waiting in the wings to step forward, but no one is trying to pull one over on you.
Right.
again, going back to the stories we tell ourselves about power and our culture. This definitely extends to the stories we tell ourselves about mediumship and spirit contact. It's supposed to be spooky. It's supposed to be intense. It's supposed to be crazy. It's supposed to be trying to hide from you. The
Right.
spirit world is actually very efficient,
Yep.
and your helping spirits are, trying to, if they're online and they are trying to get information to you, they're trying to get it to you in the most efficient way they think is possible, based on the symbolic language that they think that you understand.
Right.
And if there's an issue with receiving it, it could be, sure, stories about power. I mean, that's rather abstract, but something to work on. It's something for us all to think about. I'm always challenging the stories I tell myself about power in general. But, then there's also the question of, is there a block on their end? Do you have a particularly unhealthy ancestor who is standing directly in front of everyone else, and you can't even access everyone else?
Right.
Is your Haminja the size of a peanut? And and this is going to be a lifetime where you've got to build up that Haminja, and you've got to pay some ancestral debts with some gods and start getting that that peanut, some size on that motherfucker, something on that. Or is the block on your end? Do are you utterly possessed? Yes, you are. We are very possessed in this culture. We are all very possessed.
Yeah.
But especially perhaps possessed in those energetic areas of your life that are connected to connection,
Right.
because that's a thing. So these are different angles by which we want to, then investigate why information might not be coming through clearly. And it would be remiss if I didn't say, also, ancestors are just slow. Like, they're not like lying like Hermes with the wings on their sneakers, just like, I'm here, bitch. Ancestors are slow to cultivate.
They've got nothing but time.
They have nothing but time. Ancestral magic is bada bing, bada boom. It's blood. It moves very, very fast. When they're present and they want something to happen, you're getting, you're on Ancestry.com and you're getting the message from the person you didn't hear from in South Carolina. And so, that's happening really fast.
Right.
But the actual cultivation of ancestors, especially if they have not been fed or cultivated for a very long time, that's a slow process.
Yeah.
You can, if you have other helping spirits that you trust and you want to quicken something, and, it could serve one. In fact, I think it probably would. You can say, hey, Tiger, can you bring me to a healthy ancestral helping spirit of mine who was a magical practitioner?
Right.
And it might take, a little bit of digging, Tiger with paws in the spirit world, all right, no one's but I'm sure there is one. It might go back a few thousand years. That person might look and be like, who the fuck are you? It's not to say that things are going to be all wild and cheery, but if they're healthy, you can get access.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a question that, I was wondering if I would include it, but I might as well. Everybody wants to know, Chiron. Animals, pets, are they ancestors?
Dude, that's so real. So, I don't even know. And I work a lot with animal helping spirits in general,
Mm-hmm.
but my work with animal spirits is fairly novice, and I've had a few experiences very recently with that have been interesting, because it hits different.
Yeah.
It really hits different. And I have a special relationship with a certain kind of animal that means a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those oh, I'm so this, and then later on, you're practicing stuff spiritually, and oh wait, I really am so this.
Yeah.
And the connection is really real. And I realized, it was only a few weeks ago that I realized that my family did not have the best relationship with this animal. I had a few experiences as a kid where my family's incapacity was incapable of really caring.
Right.
And because of my deep connection to this animal, I didn't realize at the time how repeatedly traumatic this was for me.
Right.
And it was actually just a few weeks ago that I was like, oh, I should probably, again, not that this is directly Haminja, but a Haminja perspective, web.
Mm-hmm.
I have a great relationship with that animal.
Right.
My family does not.
Yeah.
And I put those two pieces together, and I was like, let's go resolve that. And I went into trance, and I just started looking at the souls of the animals, of the pets that we had across childhood, and started making sure that they got to where they needed to go. And something really healed in my heart immediately
Mm-hmm.
because my family's connection was also being taken into consideration by them,
Mm-hmm.
by this kind of animal. So I can't speak to directly to whether or not animals are ancestors. I mean, is that not an adoption in a
Yeah.
way?
Yeah.
You know, like,
Right.
yeah, how could they not be? Wow, you're blowing my fucking mind.
Well, if we really want to take like a 10,000 yard stare at such things, animals, I mean, if we were going to go evolution route, we all kind of share that common life that started however it started. But I think a lot of people were more talking about the idea of having pets on their altar and such things. And my opinion is I don't for my I had a dog growing up. She was basically a sister. Pretty much the only major pet I had besides fish. She doesn't go on my altar. I have a different way of interacting with her. It's not some kind of exclusivity that I give to only humans to be on my altar and to have this interaction. But for me, in a strange way, the way that you talked about, the interaction was different. And
Yeah, I wouldn't ever think of putting an animal, a pet, a deceased pet on my ancestor altar. I totally hear that.
yeah, yeah. So it's just I have different things that I go towards to have that interaction, and the altar and the ancestors one that's very different. That it seems it's not an exclusive club, but it kind of is.
No, I totally understand that. I mean, it's also one of the reasons why, one might, not everyone, but one might make the difference between, having a shrine that's specifically for human biological ancestors and ancestors of lineage.
Right.
These distinctions do matter, and I think it depends not only on the person but also on the spirits. What do the spirits prefer?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. This is something that, because I think a lot of people get into magic because they want things. They want material things, but they want things to happen in their life. There's the healing, there's the remediation, there's the forgiveness that you get from ancestral veneration. That's all well and good. But I think a lot of people think that when can I start asking my ancestors to start making a difference in my life? And is that something that you would encourage, Chiron?
Yeah, like today, like just like do it today.
Yeah.
Yeah, like why wait? There's a lot of again, interesting stories about power. If you do it today and you don't have $1,000 today, do you then hate them and you break your ancestral trend? Not suggested. Again, these are technologies. We're talking about quality of connection. We're talking about health of ancestral lines. We're talking about quality of technologies that are being used. This isn't, it's not about wild special skeleton keys. It is about, is the wire there? How thick is the wire? How strong are the bolts? Also what serves you, what's your destiny. There's so many things at play, but yeah, why not today? There was someone who's on Instagram recently, and I hate to be shady. I hate to be shady publicly.
Right. I hear you.
But, this person was sort of saying, it's like, if your ancestors ain't blessing you, it's because you ain't giving them Hennessy. You give your ancestors some Hennessy, and that shit get popping, and it's like 60 comments. Oh yeah, I give my ancestors 60. And it's like,
What?
ancestors aren't blessing you because you haven't given them Hennessy.
Yeah.
Because your ancestors are alcoholics. It's not because your ancestors don't love you. It's because they're withhold. And those aren't healthy ancestors. You have to cross them all over now. Cross them all over now.
Yeah.
Cross them over. There is no game being played with your life by that which is supposed to be trying to help you. No one is waiting for that special spice.
Yeah.
No one's waiting for that special alcohol. And now they're going to, if you've seen The Princess and the Frog, that's the Shadow Man.
Right.
Right. We fuck with him. We fuck with Mama Odie.
Right. I'm one of those people that's a little bit hesitant to try and ask them for things like monetary gain and whatnot. I mean, general protection, etc. Those kind of things. Absolutely, start doing those immediately. Again, just like with the pets, I have other technology and I have other things that I'll use to try and get those. But I don't think people should be shy with trying to ask their ancestors to involve themselves in their life in a more make yourself apparent way. I think that is a very healthy interaction and relationship to have with ancestors.
Also, why are people being shy at all? Is it the Protestant work ethic? Why aren't you demanding everything that you need right now and doing it every day until you have it? Why aren't you demanding and loving and requesting and, but say, I'm lost. I need answers. I need help being joyful. I need help being thankful. I need help asking for help. Why aren't you just asking for everything? Why aren't you just asking for all?
Yeah, This stuff is free. I mean, as much as it is, be bold. Be bold with what you asked for. I really think that it's all possible. Why become a magician or an occultist or whatever we want to call it, a wizard? Who cares if you're not doing this kind of thing? It just seems,
And also remember the power of the living. You're the one with the body.
yeah,
You're the one with the voice. They are now the dead, and the way that they are alive are living for you.
yeah,
You're the one with the body, which means you're the one with the capital W will. They have tremendous influence, absolutely. But you're the one who is here. You're the one on stage now. That matters so much.
yeah, absolutely. Is ancestral interaction, healing, and remediation a need? That's in capital letters, NEED, for us as humans. And are the dead the most neglected, but somehow an incredibly essential part of whatever community we find ourselves in, Chiron?
Wow, that's so potent. Ancestral mediation, I would say that for some of us, yes. I would say that
Yeah.
for some of us, yeah, it's totally a need from a health perspective, mental health, spiritual health, emotional health, and the well-being of our families,
Yeah.
which creates our culture and society. Yeah, these are the smaller parts of the web of life, of culture and society. Yeah, a lot of us do need ancestral mediation, and we need to make that a priority. As for are the dead the most forgotten? Yeah, being here in Brazil, one of the concepts that we have, one of the concepts that you get from the Congo tradition that then bleeds into and becomes Kimbanda here in Brazil, becomes Palo in Cuba, is the idea of the word Kalunga.
Yes.
And Kalunga is the sea of dead. And it's not just the sea of dead, of just dead humans. It's the sea of time. Everything is, we are swimming in dead at all times, and not just dead humans, but dead moments, dead spaces. Death feeds life from an angle that we can't even wrap our minds around. And it's one of the reasons why traditions like Palo and Kimbanda are so strong and beloved and so feared. It is not to play from a cool power play, but bad power story. But yeah, we generally are, as human beings, looking up.
Right.
We want to look up for hope. We want the bright ones. We want the yellow ones. Though we want we love divinity. We love divinity and big shows. The idea of leaning on the past and what came before us to move us forward, it sometimes seems a little bit counterintuitive, but it's not.
Right. I love the sentiment, though, that the dead is a sea. That to me resonates on such a huge level, because I think that for magicians, it's a really neglected aspect. Everybody wants to go to the angels. Everybody wants to go talk to the demons, but not registering the restless dead, the hungry dead that we have in our lives would be like a sailor who says that he doesn't believe in the sea. Like, it's really odd to me that this is the case, but
It also, for me, kind of reflects another thing that we have about not we lost something about our understanding about what it means to be human. Being human is very special, and I feel like if we gain that back, if we had a better understanding of the majesty and uniqueness of what it means to be human, maybe when that sly trickster god comes up and says, maybe in 300 years when that sly trickster god comes up and says, "Have I got a deal for you?" The kid by the creek will just, playing with the stick, will just say, "No, I got my granddad," and just walks away.
I love the way that you began this show with this idea of having that map and saying that you are here. And I think that one of the major ways of involving yourself with being here is a sense of being grounded, and even going beyond that, a sense of having roots, which is neglected for a lot of people. And I think they are missing out a great deal of not just personal growth, as you mentioned, better mental health, but just in some way of being able to form a somewhat solid foundation, even if you feel that your foundation is a bit broken or a little bit off kilter. the you are here speaks to a need, a necessity of getting right with your family, your ancestry, as well as the things that got you to where you are here and now. So, Chiron, I really want to thank you for being on the show, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. And where can people find your stuff? Where can people get a hold of you? You do consultations. You do a ton of stuff. When's the next book? Is what I'm. All of it. All of these questions, sir.
It's a really good question. So I can be found on Twitter at Chiron Armand. I can be found on Instagram at Chiron Armand. My website is impactshamanism.com. And yeah, next book. It's a really great question. I have about like 5 half-written proposals in my desktop, along with lots of like memes and
Right.
and there's stuff that's formulating, but it's been so. This has been really, really rich and a real blessing to me. I walk away from our conversation with new insight to take back into my own, my own little lab here. And so I'm so grateful that you had your perspectives and experiences so valuable. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Hey, man, this is what we do. We're here to share. I truly think that the reason we're here, not just to live life, is to share things. So thank you for sharing your knowledge so much. And I gotta ask one last question, Chiron, because and this has nothing to do with ancestors, or maybe it does. But you once made mention on the Twitters that something to the effect of, "Holy shit, Solomonic magic works."
Oh my God.
What you been doing, sir? What kind of hijinks have you been getting into? Have you been going to the old Goetia? What's been happening, dude?
Dude, bro, like, oh man. So yeah, my time here in Sao Paulo has been the word for full in Portuguese is cheia. So my time here in Sao Paulo is just cheia. It's been full of some really, really, really out there and unique spiritual experiences, the kind of which when you really feel like you've already gone to the edge, you're like, oh wow, there's nothing else.
Right.
And this year really just, I mean, to say I've been pushed over the edge would be a complete and utter understatement.
Right.
And that is disconcerting because I'm 34 and there's a lot ahead of me and I don't want more, I don't think. But there was a very crucial moment in which, while I was here, someone came into my life with the very specific knowledge that I would need in approximately 1 month's time regarding some Solomonic magical technique. And it was related to some past life stuff.
Okay.
That was that specific river. I'm a believer that many different perspectives and there's more than one way to skin a cat.
You betcha.
But there is something about the grimoire tradition and Solomonic tradition in which the things that I was encountering needed to be dealt with from that perspective.
Right.
And I had to put my big boy underwear on. And it's not that I've never touched. It's not that I've never like stood at the gates of the Solomonic tradition. There's a little bit of not crossover, but resonance with Kimbanda. Saint Cyprian has been a mainstay in my life for years. One of my closest magical allies. I've always been in proximity.
Right.
Many of my some people closest to me are strong grimoire practitioners and strong Solomonic practitioners, but I never had to, for the sake of literally serious emergency, do the thing. And I just had to sort of respect that I was given the wisdom that was needed, and that these my own helping spirits were like, all right, so do it. And I'm like, but herbs,
Right.
but my little kid, do the thing.
Do the thing.
And it's amazing what you can do when you just believe in yourself.
Absolutely. And there is some crossover with hoodoo and some grimoires.
For sure.
It's
I worked. That's true. I have done that.
Yeah.
I have engaged Solomonic stuff from a folk magic perspective. What was wild for me was this required a far more intensive ritual process.
Right.
That I had never undergone. And yeah, I was nervous as fuck.
No doubt. Man, I wish you the best of luck with that, and I hope you keep it up because, yeah, for myself, that's some powerful stuff. It's definitely, as others have said, kind of like you're in a commando unit now when you start dabbling with that kind of thing, and yeah,
It hits different.
It does.
It hits different.
Yeah, but it's all wonderful. Fantastic. So all of Chiron's links will be in the show notes for this episode. Where to get those show notes, head to whatmagicisthis.com. I do show notes for every show. There's going to be a ton of really great links in there, some books to look at as far as ancestors are concerned. I'm known for my show notes, and let's keep that trend continuing because, yeah, there's going to be some great ones on this episode. So head to whatmagicisthis.com for those. Also up on there will be a way to subscribe to the show, whether it be on iTunes or Spotify. Basically, if they've got podcasts, I'm going to be listed. Just have a look, and it'll pop up for sure. Also, on What Magic Is This, you can find my Twitter account, my Instagram account, and my Facebook account. Chiron is on Instagram, and I have to say, his stories are the absolute best, so be sure to click on those. They're just the funniest things on earth. So yes, check those out. Chiron is also on Facebook as well, and he's also on Twitter, as he mentioned. If you love the show, please leave a review for the podcast. iTunes is preferred. I think you can leave a quick review on Stitcher, but yeah, if you love the show, please leave a review. The reviews have been somewhat quiet over the last month, so I don't know what's going on there, but if you have something nice to say about the show, please leave a review. If you have something unnice to say about the show, keep it to yourself. I'm just going to put it that way. If you enjoy the program, tell a friend. Tell a friend about the show. Hopefully they'll enjoy it as much as you do because, yeah, sharing is caring. I say that every episode, and I mean it. Friends are great, and I do a lot of sharing on this show, and so if you can share it with a friend, that would be greatly appreciated. Everyone, I have got a Patreon account. That's right. And we're having a ton of fun there. I just put out an episode about the god Hecate. I know a lot of you have wanted me to do a show about Hecate. Well, I have, and it is on Patreon. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, head over to Patreon. It's only $7 a month. That's really not that much. And I'm going to be releasing a lot of really great content on there. Actually, some of the Patreon content is involved in what Chiron and I have been talking about today. I did a 23-minute video on setting up an ancestral altar, how I set up an ancestral altar, which was very well received. But the 23 minutes, that's longer than a sitcom on TV. Just going to put it that way. But yeah, that's on Patreon. So if you are interested in things like Hecate or setting up an ancestral altar or how I do my magic, best place to go, patreon.com/whatmagicisthis, $7 a month. Yeah, you're set. If you can't get enough of me 3 times a month with this show, Patreon is a great bet to satisfy your need. Did this show mean about as much to you as, say, a video rental did back in 1994? Well, there's a way to donate money. It's a PayPal me. Go to whatmagicisthis.com, you find the little icon, and just click on that, and you can donate, I don't know, 50 cents to $50 to $500 to $500,000. I don't care. Every little bit helps, and it would be greatly appreciated to keep this show going, as it is pretty much the only thing I've got going on as far as work is concerned. I'm not trying to solicit any kind of sympathy, but I'm just putting it out there. All of that is available on whatmagicisthis.com. Chiron, this has been such a fantastic time. I hope that if I was to ask you to come back on the show, you would.
Absolutely. You so much. I mean, whenever, please, truly.
That's the show, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show on ancestors. I hope you all took away something fantastic from that. And thank you so much, Chiron, for your time. And yeah, come on back to What Magic Is This? We're going to talk about some more of this crazy, weird, wonderful, scary, sometimes magical, occult shit. And yeah, until then, I want everybody to stay healthy, stay hopeful, and stay luminous. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.